It's heads.
Oh!
Which means I get to pick.
Oh, man.
And that means we're going with somebody I don't think you think I thought we were going to go with.
That's a bold choice for your first overall pick.
His name's Luis Severino.
Wow.
In division. Now, this guy had a bad year. There's no way around it. He did not have a good year. He had an ERA north of 6, a 65 ERA plus. He had a rough season.
It's not good.
What do we know about this Orioles team? You know what I'm about to say? They can fix pitchers.
Yep.
And who has a higher ceiling than this guy on the market that has a floor this low as of right now? I think Luis Severino is the guy you go after if you're Baltimore because his price tag is not going to be that high. He's probably looking for a prove-it deal. 1 year, I don't know the price, but you could probably go out and get him for something pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And if you add him at his height to this rotation, they could be unstoppable. Imagine a fixed Luis Severino next to this year's Bradish and this year's Grayson Rodriguez. It would have been a three-headed monster in that rotation. Now, obviously, there's some work to be done, but Luis Severino has shown that, and we've seen it time and time again in division with the New York Yankees, that if he's on and that slider's on, he's got one of the best pitches in all of the major leagues. Obviously, there's risk there involved, but I trust that Mike Elias and this pitching department can go out there and fix a guy who has a ceiling as high as Luis Severino does.
That's a big swing.
It is.
With Luis Severino. Talking about somebody who was thought to be a superstar in the making in New York, back-to-back All-Star games in 2017 and 2018. 2.98 ERA in 2017, finished third in AL Cy Young voting at just 23 years old.
Yeah.
He hasn't pitched more than 30 games since 2018.
Yes.
A lot of injury concern there. It does remind me a little bit of the Jack Flaherty deal.
I knew you were going to say
at the deadline.
But there's difference there.
But
there's more success that Luis Severino has experienced.
To that point, though, I think the Jack Flaherty deal was a risk worth taking. Because if you got the best out of Jack Flaherty, then you were getting a really, really good starting pitcher. I think Luis Severino would make a lot of sense. There's a lot of ifs attached with Severino.
Yes, absolutely. It's a risk. It's a gamble, but I think it's one that the Orioles can take considering what you have in this development team. And if you're not going to use it, why have it? So I think the Orioles should go out and utilize what likely can be considered one of the best pitching development teams in all of baseball, considering what they did this year with so many arms that were not expected to be this good. So Luis Severino's my guy this time.
Yeah, I mean, if Luis Severino gives you 25 starts, you could be looking at maybe not the 2017, 2018 version of Severino, but you could be looking at somebody realistically with an ERA in the low threes. If everything works out, if the health works out, if the Orioles are able to figure it out. Yeah, he's only 29 years old. I think that would be a worthwhile risk worth taking.
So what do you got?
I've got a few guys that are kind of in a different sphere here than Luis Severino, shooting a little bit higher in terms of, the years that it might take to sign one of these guys to a contract. When you're looking at the upper end of the free agent starting pitchers this year, you're looking at Blake Snell, who is going to command a monster deal, and I'm not terribly confident that Blake Snell will repeat his success walking 5 batters per 9 innings and somehow having an ERA of like 2.
Wild year.
I think Aaron Nola is going to command a ton as well.
It's going to be a big contract.
And, a little bit of inconsistencies here and there with Aaron Nola. So I kind of went for that second tier of starting pitcher, looking for a guy that I think the Orioles could bring in. Somebody who might command a similar deal to, say, Taijuan Walker last year, 3 or 4 year deal. The guy I'm going with is a familiar face, and it's Eduardo Rodriguez.
Okay.
I think it would probably take a 3 or 4 year deal to get him. Come on home, Eduardo. He was in Baltimore, traded in the Andrew Miller deal, got traded to the Dodgers at last year's deadline, said, I don't want to do that. Vetoed that deal. And you kind of thought that he would opt into the rest of his contract with Detroit. He said, I want to stay here. It's the place I want to be. He's zigging
when everybody else is zagging.
He's zigging, he's zagging. Every which way. But when Eduardo Rodriguez is on, he is excellent. He has 4 seasons with an ERA in the 330 to 380 range, has some postseason experience. 330 ERA this season in 26 games, 8.5 strikeouts per 9. He's got a 5-pitch mix, and his sinker and cutter aren't that great. He doesn't pitch them super frequently, and when he does, they're not his best pitches. I think the Orioles could unlock that a little bit. We know the sinker and cutter are kind of the wave for starting pitchers right now. So I think Eduardo Rodriguez makes a ton of sense. He's not going to command as big of a contract years-wise. He's not going to be as long of a commitment as somebody like Blake Snell or Aaron Nola, but he has the upside, I believe, to be just as good as those two guys. And Eduardo Rodriguez is somebody that you would feel pretty comfortable giving the ball on opening day. I mean, if that was your pitch to Eduardo Rodriguez, saying you could come to Baltimore and be the number one starting pitcher on a team that just won the American League and has, deep playoff run aspirations, that's the pitch for Eduardo Rodriguez. He doesn't need to come in and be, the number 3 guy in a stacked rotation. He could potentially be the guy in Baltimore. He has that kind of upside. So I think Rodriguez, given the consistency that we have seen when he's on the field, there are some question marks there, but when he's on the field, he's really, really good. And I think Eduardo Rodriguez coming home as a left-handed pitcher, again, in a left-handed pitching-friendly ballpark, makes a lot of sense for Baltimore.
And he's been a guy that up until last year, I think we all around baseball were looking at him to still break out. Because he had a lot of talent. We all knew that. He'd put it together some years, not some others. But this past season, with a 3.3 ERA, and he did it on a team that wasn't winning games, which for me is a huge upside. If you're still going out there every 5 games and locking in, despite the fact that there's no chance your team's making the playoffs, that's a huge credit in my book. So I like Eduardo Rodriguez here. He finally put it together last year and had a big season for a team that wasn't making the playoffs. If he did that in Baltimore, to your point, that would have been hugely helpful, and he could be the opening day starter for this rotation. And a guy who's 8 years into his career now. He's kind of a veteran of the game now, so probably a good locker room guy as well. So I don't hate that pick at all. I really like it.